Our love was carved in stone. But betrayal breaks even marble.
The angel's broken wing crumbled between Evan O'Hara's fingers like old secrets finally coming to light. He'd been restoring the weather-damaged statue for 3 hours when the sound of engines made him look up from the neglected graveyard. Across Miller Street, a convoy of city vehicles surrounded his stone sculpting workshop, the same building where he'd spent 15 years carving tombstones and garden sculptures for half the county. 3 men in hard hats pointed at his workshop's roof while a woman in a navy blazer took notes. Even from 50 yards away, Evan recognized that blazer. His wife Nadine wore it to every city development meeting. The angel's marble face stared at him with hollow eyes as understanding hit like a sledgehammer to the chest. The demolition notices weren't random urban planning. They were targeted. Evan wiped marble dust from his hands and walked toward the street, each step revealing more of what he'd been blind to see. The zoning official handed Nadine a manila folder thick with permits. She smiled, not the tired smile she gave him at dinner, but something bright and conspiratorial. "Afternoon, Mr. O'Hara." Officer Baez rolled down his patrol car window. "Working late again?" "Just finishing up." Evan kept walking. "Lot of activity at my shop today." Baez glanced toward the city vehicles. "Progress, right? This whole block's getting a makeover. Your wife's been pushing hard for the revitalization project." The word revitalization tasted bitter. Evan had built his workshop from nothing after his army stint, buying the rundown building when Nadine was pregnant with Liam. Every stone table, every tool rack, every piece of equipment represented years of 12-hour days. "When did the permits get approved?" Evan asked. "Last week's emergency session. Fast-tracked due to structural concerns." Baez smiled. "Lucky your wife works in city development. She'll make sure you get fair compensation." "Lucky." Evan watched Nadine shake hands with the lead inspector. She tucked the manila folder under her arm like a prize. Back at the graveyard, Evan knelt beside the broken angel. His phone buzzed with a text from Nadine. "Working late again. Don't wait up." He looked at the timestamp. She'd sent it 20 minutes ago while standing 50 yards away. The angel's wing felt heavier in his palm now, weighted with more than marble. 15 years of marriage, and he'd never questioned why Nadine worked so many late nights. Never wondered why she suddenly cared about urban development after years of complaining about her boring city job. Evan pulled out his phone and opened the camera app. Through the zoom lens, he watched Nadine laugh at something the inspector said. The man was tall, broad-shouldered, wearing expensive work boots that had never seen real labor. A memory surfaced. 2 months ago, Nadine mentioning a new contractor in the neighborhood, someone named Reed Caldwell, who'd moved from Philadelphia to flip houses in their working-class area. She'd said it like he was doing them all a favor. The inspector climbed into a red pickup truck. Even from across the street, Evan could read the magnetic sign, Caldwell Construction. His wife watched the truck drive away, then got into her Honda and headed in the opposite direction. Not toward home, but toward the nice part of town where the old factory owners used to live. Evan stayed in the graveyard until sunset, thinking. The angel's wing lay in pieces around his knees like a promise broken beyond repair. The next morning, Evan arrived at his workshop before dawn. The city notice taped to his door was dated yesterday, the same day he'd seen Nadine with the permits. The demolition was scheduled for 6 weeks out, pending final safety inspections. He unlocked the heavy steel door and flipped on the fluorescent lights. The workshop smelled like stone dust and WD-40, familiar as his own sweat. 20 tombstones in various stages of completion lined the east wall. Garden angels and memorial plaques covered every available surface. This was his life's work. Everything he'd built after coming home from the Middle East, with a head full of nightmares and hands that needed something useful to do. The front door chimed. Mr. Prewitt shuffled in, leaning heavily on his walker. At 73, Evan's old mentor still had the keen eyes of a master craftsman. "Saw the notice," Prewitt said without preamble. "Bullcrap timing. City says it's structural concerns." "My ass." Prewitt lowered himself onto a wooden stool. "I've been watching this neighborhood for 50 years. Nothing wrong with this building that a little paint won't fix." Evan ran his hand along a half-finished headstone. The granite was solid, unforgiving, like the truth he didn't want to face. "Tom," he said carefully, "you still drive by here at night?" Prewitt's weathered face sharpened. "Sometimes. Old habits. Why? Ever see anything unusual?" The old man was quiet for a long moment. Outside, a garbage truck rumbled past, metal grinding against metal. "That red pickup's been here a lot," Prewitt finally said. "Real late. Sometimes stays till morning." Evan's hammer felt heavier in his hand. "What pickup?" "Caldwell Construction." "Big guy, fancy boots. Always parks behind the building where you can't see from the street." Prewitt's eyes met Evan's. "Your missus was here a couple nights ago. Saw her car when I drove by around midnight." The workshop suddenly felt smaller, the walls closing in like a tomb. Evan set down his hammer before he said something he couldn't take back. "Maybe they were discussing the renovation project," he managed. Prewitt snorted. "Son, I've been married 47 years. That wasn't business." Evan waited until Nadine left for work before searching their bedroom. He felt sick doing it, like he was violating something sacred. But sacred things didn't survive lies. Her dresser drawers revealed nothing unusual. Same clothes, same jewelry, same travel-sized bottles of lotion she'd been using for years. He checked her nightstand, finding only romance novels and reading glasses. Then he opened her laptop. Nadine had never been careful with passwords. She used the same one for everything: Liam's birthday, plus their anniversary year. The screen opened to her email inbox. Evan scrolled through messages looking for anything from Reed Caldwell or Caldwell Construction. Nothing obvious, but he noticed several emails from her friend Sarah Dunn in the past month. Sarah worked in the same city office, handling permit applications. The latest email from Sarah was sent 2 days ago. "Everything's approved. E won't know what hit him." Evan's vision blurred. He read it again, then clicked on the thread to see earlier messages. "Sarah, are you sure about this?" "Evan's a good guy." Nadine, "Good guys finish last. Reed's offering me something better than 15 years of stone dust and silence." Sarah, "The permits will hold up in court." Nadine, "Reed knows people. The whole block's getting cleared anyway. Evan's just collateral damage." Sarah, "What about Liam?" Nadine, "Kids adapt. Reed's got money, connections, better life for all of us." Evan closed the laptop and sat on their bed. His bed, he realized. Nadine had already moved on in her mind. He was just the last to know. His phone buzzed. A text from Nadine. "Meeting ran late, grabbing dinner with Sarah. Don't wait up." It was 10:30 in the morning. Evan walked to Liam's room and knocked on the door. His 15-year-old son was getting ready for school, earbuds in, nodding to whatever music teenagers listen to these days. "Dad?" Liam pulled out one earbud. "You okay? You look like I got hit by a truck." "Yeah, actually." Evan sat on the edge of Liam's bed. His son had Nadine's dark hair, but Evan's gray eyes, the same eyes that had seen too much in Kandahar and come home looking for peace. "If things got complicated around here," Evan said carefully, "you know you can talk to me, right?" Liam frowned. "What kind of complicated?" "Any kind. Adult stuff that doesn't make sense." "Are you and Mom getting divorced?" The question hit like a punch to the solar plexus. Kids always knew before the parents admitted it. "I don't know yet," Evan said honestly. "Would that scare you?" Liam shrugged with teenage bravado, but his hands fidgeted with his backpack straps. "Half my friends' parents are divorced. It's not the end of the world." "Which half would you want to live with?" The question hung in the air between them. Liam looked out his bedroom window toward the workshop, where Evan had taught him to carve his first sculpture, a rough bear that still sat on Liam's bookshelf. "The half that never lies to me," Liam said quietly. That afternoon, Evan drove to Fletcher's Electronics, a cramped store that sold security cameras to paranoid homeowners and suspicious spouses. The owner, Jerry Fletcher, had done 2 tours in Iraq and understood the value of surveillance. "You want something subtle or obvious?" Jerry asked, pulling out a cardboard box full of small black devices. "Subtle, battery-powered if possible." "How long you need them to run?" "A few weeks. Maybe longer." Jerry nodded like he'd heard this request before. "Motion-activated saves battery. These little guys will record for 6 hours once triggered, then go back to sleep. Memory card holds about 2 weeks of footage." Evan bought 4 cameras and spent an hour learning how to set them up. Jerry threw in a cheap tablet for viewing the footage remotely. "Word of advice," Jerry said as Evan paid cash. "Whatever you're looking for, make sure you really want to find it. Some truths are harder to live with than lies." Evan drove home and installed the cameras that evening. One pointed at the front door, one at the back entrance to his workshop, one in the alley behind the building, and one aimed at the parking spot where Nadine usually left her car. Then he waited. The first footage came 3 days later. Evan was eating lunch alone at his kitchen table when the tablet chimed with a motion alert. He opened the app and watched a red pickup truck pull into the alley behind his workshop. Reed Caldwell climbed out, tall, confident, wearing those expensive work boots. He walked to the back door of the workshop like he owned the place. 10 minutes later, Nadine's Honda pulled up beside the truck. Evan set down his sandwich. His appetite was gone anyway. The tablet showed Nadine getting out of her car, looking around nervously, then walking to the workshop's back entrance. Reed opened the door from inside. They disappeared into the building together. Evan fast-forwarded through 2 hours of empty alley footage. At 3:47 p.m., the back door opened again. Reed emerged first, shirtless, carrying his work shirt in one hand. He walked to his truck with the casual swagger of a man who'd just taken something that wasn't his. Nadine followed 30 seconds later, smoothing down her hair and checking her reflection in the Honda's side mirror. She looked satisfied. Happy, even. Evan watched the footage 3 more times, memorizing every detail. The way Reed's hand lingered on Nadine's lower back, how she laughed at something he whispered, the casual intimacy of people who'd been doing this for a while. His workshop, the place where he'd built their future, had become the location of its destruction. The tablet chimed again. New footage from the front camera showed a city inspector's van pulling up to the workshop. The same official from the graveyard got out, along with 2 other men in hard hats. They spent 20 minutes inside, taking pictures and measurements. When they came out, one of them was shaking his head and writing notes on a clipboard. Evan realized he was watching his condemnation being manufactured in real time. That night, Nadine came home at 11 p.m. with takeout Chinese food and an elaborate story about a city council meeting that had run late. "How was your day?" she asked, settling beside him on the couch with her lo mein. "Productive." Evan kept his eyes on the television. "Got some new security cameras installed at the shop." Nadine's chopsticks paused halfway to her mouth. "Security cameras? Insurance company recommended them. All these break-ins in the neighborhood." "Oh." She resumed eating, but Evan caught the quick glance she shot toward the front door. "That makes sense. Figured I should protect what's mine." Nadine looked at him sharply, but Evan's face revealed nothing. 15 years of marriage had taught him to hide his thoughts when necessary. "Speaking of the shop," Nadine said carefully, "I heard about the demolition notice. I'm sorry, honey. The city council had to make some tough decisions about public safety." "Public safety? Structural concerns?" "The building inspector found some issues with the foundation." Evan nodded slowly. "Which inspector?" "I don't remember his name. Some guy from the county." The lie came so easily it was almost artistic. Evan had watched her coordinate with that same inspector just 3 days ago. "Well," he said, "I guess we'll have to make the best of it." Nadine smiled and squeezed his hand. "I'm glad you're being reasonable about this. Change can be good, you know? And maybe it's time for you to try something new." "Like what?" "I don't know. Reed mentioned there's good money in construction these days. He might be able to help you get started." Reed. She'd said his name like they were old friends, not like a contractor she'd mentioned once in passing. "How well do you know this Reed guy?" Evan asked. "Not well. He's just friendly, community-minded." Nadine's cheeks flushed slightly. "He cares about improving the neighborhood." Evan squeezed her hand back, matching her smile. "That's nice. Maybe I should meet him." "Oh, I don't think that's necessary. He's very busy with his projects." "I bet he is." The next morning, Evan drove to the county courthouse and paid $25 to access public records. He spent 3 hours in a windowless room, scrolling through property deeds, permit applications, and construction contracts. Reed Caldwell had been busy. In the past 6 months, he'd purchased 4 properties on Evans Block through a limited liability company called Millbrook Development. 3 of the buildings were already demolished. Evans' workshop was the last holdout. But the interesting part was the financing. Reed's initial purchases had been made with cash, but his recent activities were funded by a construction loan from Keystone Community Bank. The loan documents listed several pieces of collateral, including, Evan had to read it twice to believe it, his own workshop property. Someone had used Evan's building as collateral for Reed's loan. Evan photographed the documents with his phone, then drove across town to Keystone Community Bank. The loan officer, a nervous young man named Bradley, reviewed Evan's property deed and frowned at his computer screen. "This is unusual," Bradley said. "According to our records, you signed a power of attorney agreement allowing your wife to handle financial matters related to this property." "I never signed anything like that." Bradley's frown deepened. "The document was notarized and filed with the county. Mrs. O'Hara used it to secure Mr. Caldwell's construction loan." "Can I see this power of attorney? I'll need to check with my supervisor." 20 minutes later, Bradley returned with a manila folder. Inside was a single sheet of paper, bearing Evan's forged signature and Nadine's notarized seal. The document gave Nadine broad authority to mortgage, sell, or otherwise encumber Evan's workshop property for the purpose of joint business ventures and community development projects. Evan stared at his wife's careful forgery. She'd practiced his signature until it was nearly perfect. "When was this filed?" he asked. 3 months ago?" 3 months, right around the time Nadine had started working those mysterious late nights. "What happens if the construction loan goes into default?" Evan asked. Bradley consulted his screen. "The bank would foreclose on the collateral properties, including your workshop. Even though I never agreed to use it as collateral? That would be a legal matter. You'd need to prove the power of attorney was fraudulent, which would require proving his wife had committed forgery, perjury, and fraud." Evan felt the walls of his old life closing in. "Can you print me a copy of this file?" Bradley glanced around nervously. "I'm not supposed to. My property is being used as collateral without my knowledge. I think that gives me the right to see the paperwork." 5 minutes later, Evan left the bank with copies of every document related to Reed's loan. His workshop was worth about $180,000 according to the latest appraisal. Reed had borrowed $300,000 against multiple properties, including Evan's. If Reed's construction projects failed, Evan would lose everything. That evening, Evan sat in his workshop, surrounded by half-finished sculptures and the smell of stone dust. The place felt different now, violated, like someone had been living in his home without permission, which he realized was exactly what had happened. His phone rang. The caller ID showed Kyle Brannick, a private investigator Evan had found through Jerry Fletcher's recommendation. "I've got some information for you," Kyle said without preamble. "Your wife and Reed Caldwell have been meeting regularly for 4 months. Hotel rooms, restaurants, his construction sites. They're not being subtle about it. What about the city permits? That's where it gets interesting. Your wife's friend Sarah Dunn has been fast-tracking approvals for Caldwell's projects. Normal permits take 6 to 8 weeks. His are getting approved in days. Is that illegal? Depends on whether money changed hands. I'm still digging into that." Evan walked to his largest work table, running his fingers along the smooth granite surface. He'd carved hundreds of memorials on this table, names and dates marking the end of people's stories. "What else?" he asked. "Caldwell's got financial problems. His Philadelphia projects went bust, left him owing money to some serious people. This Pennsylvania venture is his last shot at staying solvent. How serious? The kind that break legs first and ask questions later." Evan absorbed this information. Reed wasn't just stealing his wife. He was using Evan's property to escape his own mistakes. "One more thing," Kyle continued. "I found out where they're meeting tonight. Some fancy restaurant in Harrisburg. Want me to get pictures?" "No," Evan said. "I've seen enough." He hung up and looked around his workshop. 20 years of work surrounded him. Tombstones for people who'd run out of time, garden sculptures for families who still believed in beauty. All of it built on ground that was no longer his. Evan picked up his heaviest hammer and tested its weight. The steel head caught the fluorescent light like a promise, but violence wasn't the answer. Reed and Nadine expected him to react with emotion, to make mistakes they could use against him. The betrayed husband who couldn't handle the truth. They didn't know that Evan had learned patience in the Middle East, where rushing got you end. They didn't know that stone carving had taught him to work slowly, carefully, removing only what needed to be removed. Evan set down the hammer and picked up his phone. He had calls to make. The first call was to Angela Prewitt, Mr. Prewitt's daughter. She was a paralegal at a downtown law firm and had been asking Evan to teach her stone carving for months. "I need a favor," Evan said when she answered. "A big one." "What kind of favor?" "The kind that involves property law and creative problem solving." Angela was quiet for a moment. Are you in trouble? I'm about to be. Can you meet me at the workshop tomorrow morning? Dad mentioned you've been having some problems. Yeah, I can be there at 9. The second call was to his Army buddy, Marcus Thompson, who now worked as a business consultant in Pittsburgh. Evan Jesus, it's been forever, Marcus said. How's civilian life treating you? Like a kick in the teeth. I need advice on setting up a limited liability company. What kind of business? The kind that protects assets from people who want to steal them. Marcus's tone shifted. You want to talk about this over the phone? Probably not. I can drive down this weekend. We'll figure it out. The third call was to Jerry Fletcher. I need more cameras, Evan said. And maybe some other equipment. What kind of other equipment? The kind that records audio. Jerry was quiet for a long moment. You sure about this path you're on? No, Evan admitted. But I'm sure about the path they put me on. I'll have everything ready tomorrow. Evan's final call was to his bank. He spoke to the manager, an older woman named Patricia who'd handled his account for 10 years. I need to move some money around, he told her, and I need it done quietly. How quietly? The kind of quiet that doesn't show up on joint account statements. Patricia sighed. Evan, are you getting divorced? Not yet, but I'm getting prepared. The next morning, Angela Prewitt arrived at the workshop carrying a leather briefcase and wearing the determined expression of someone ready for battle. Dad told me what's happening, she said without preamble. Show me the documents. Evan spread the bank records across his work table. Angela studied them with the focused intensity of a surgeon examining x-rays. This is bad, she said after 10 minutes, but it's not hopeless. The forged power of attorney is the key. If we can prove fraud, we can void the whole arrangement. How do we prove fraud? Handwriting analysis, forensic examination of the documents, witnesses who can testify about your wife's access to your personal papers. Angela looked up from the paperwork. But that takes time, and you said the demolition is scheduled for 6 weeks. So what do we do? Angela smiled grimly. We get creative. Tell me about this property transfer you mentioned. Evan had been thinking about this all night. My mentor, Mr. Prewitt, he's been like a father to me since I got out of the Army. What if I sold him the workshop? For how much? $1. Gift deed, family transfer. Keeps it out of Reed's reach. That could work, but it has to be done before the bank realizes what's happening, and you'd need to trust Mr. Prewitt completely. I trust him with my life. Angela pulled a legal pad from her briefcase. Okay, let's make a list. First, we transfer the property to avoid foreclosure. Second, we gather evidence of the fraud. Third, we figure out how to use that evidence. What about the demolition order? That's trickier. City permits are harder to challenge than bank documents. But if we can prove corruption in the approval process, Nadine's friend Sarah, she's been fast-tracking Reed's permits. Can you prove that? Evan thought about the email thread he'd seen on Nadine's laptop. Maybe. I need to get back into my wife's computer. Be careful. If she suspects you're investigating, she'll cover her tracks. She already thinks I'm too stupid to figure it out. Angela's expression hardened. Then let's prove her wrong. That afternoon, Evan installed Jerry Fletcher's new surveillance equipment throughout his workshop. Audio recording devices hidden in electrical outlets, motion-activated cameras with night vision, and a sophisticated system that uploaded everything to a secure server. This is military-grade stuff, Jerry explained as they tested the equipment. Audio quality is crystal clear, video is high definition. If anyone says or does anything in this building, you'll have a record. How long will it record? Continuously, as long as there's power. Motion sensors activate the cameras, but the audio runs 24/7. Evan surveyed his transformed workshop. Every corner was now under surveillance. Every conversation would be recorded. It felt like turning his sanctuary into a trap. You sure about this? Jerry asked. Once you start down this road, there's no going back. They already started down this road. I'm just catching up. That evening, Evan cooked dinner for his family like he had hundreds of times before. Spaghetti with meat sauce, garlic bread, Caesar salad. Liam set the table while Nadine poured wine for herself and Evan. How was work today? Evan asked, cutting into his pasta. Busy. Lots of permit applications to process. Nadine sipped her wine. Actually, I might have to work late again tomorrow night. Big project coming up for approval. What kind of project? Mixed-use development, residential and commercial space. Really exciting for the neighborhood. Liam looked up from his phone. Is that the thing that's replacing Dad's workshop? Nadine's fork paused halfway to her mouth. It's part of a larger revitalization effort. Your father's workshop is just one piece of the puzzle. But where will Dad work? There are other locations. Change can be good, sweetie. Evan watched his wife lie to their son with the same casual ease she'd been lying to him. Liam's face showed confusion, the dawning awareness that his parents weren't telling him everything. I've been thinking, Evan said carefully. Maybe I should meet this Reed Caldwell. Since he's so involved with the neighborhood development, Nadine's wine glass stopped halfway to her lips. I don't think that's necessary. Why not? If I'm going to lose my workshop to his project, seems like we should talk. He's very busy. I'm sure he can make time. Community relations and all that. Nadine set down her wine glass with a sharp clink. Evan, just let the city handle this. Reed deals with officials, not individual property owners. But I thought you said he was community-minded. He is, but then he won't mind meeting the guy whose livelihood he's destroying. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Liam looked back and forth between his parents like he was watching a tennis match. Fine, Nadine said tightly. I'll mention it to him. Great. How about tomorrow night, since you're working late anyway? Nadine's face flushed. Tomorrow's not good for him. How do you know? I handle his permit applications. I know his schedule. Evan smiled and took another bite of spaghetti. Well, whenever he's free. I'm not going anywhere. The rest of dinner passed in tense silence. Liam excused himself early, claiming homework. Nadine cleared the dishes with sharp, angry movements. What's gotten into you? She asked when they were alone. Nothing. Just trying to be proactive about my future. Your future is what we make it, together. Evan met her eyes across the kitchen. Is it? Nadine stared at him for a long moment, like she was seeing him clearly for the first time in months. Then she grabbed her purse and keys. I'm going for a drive, she said. Don't wait up. Evan listened to her car start and pull away. Then he opened his tablet and checked the workshop cameras. 20 minutes later, Nadine's Honda appeared in the alley behind his building. The footage from that night was devastating. Reed and Nadine spent 3 hours in Evan's workshop, and the audio equipment captured every word. He's getting suspicious, Nadine's voice was tight with anxiety. So what? What's he going to do, call the cops? Reed laughed. By the time he figures out what happened, the building will be demolished and we'll be counting money. You don't know Evan. He's quiet, but he's not stupid. Honey, I've been running scams since before your husband learned to tie his boots. Trust me, he's not a threat. Evan listened to them discuss his future like he was already dead. Reed outlined his plan to flip the entire block, using the properties as collateral for bigger loans. Nadine talked about how they'd split the profits and move to Florida. What about Liam? Nadine asked. Kids adapt. He'll be fine with the divorce settlement. Evan won't just give up his son. He won't have a choice. By the time this is over, he'll be too broke to fight for custody. The audio quality was perfect. Every word would hold up in court. But the most damning moment came near the end of their conversation. Reed's phone rang, and he answered on speaker. Yeah, it's me, Reed said. Everything's on schedule. No, the property owner doesn't suspect anything. I told you, my girl in city planning has it handled. The permits are bulletproof. Yeah, Sarah's been very cooperative. Amazing what people will do for a little extra cash. Bribery, conspiracy, fraud. Evan had enough evidence to destroy them all. He saved the files to 3 different locations and emailed copies to himself. Then he sat in his kitchen, planning his next move. The old Evan would have confronted them directly, demanded explanations, tried to save his marriage through conversation and compromise. But the old Evan hadn't been betrayed by the person he trusted most in the world. The next morning, Evan drove to Mr. Prewitt's house with a deed transfer document Angela had prepared. The old man lived in a tiny bungalow filled with 50 years of accumulated wisdom and dust. You sure about this? Prewitt asked, reviewing the paperwork. Signing your life's work over to me? It's temporary, just until I can sort out the legal mess. And if something happens to me? I'm 73, son. Not exactly a long-term investment. Angela's prepared a will amendment. If anything happens to you, the property goes to Liam. Either way, it stays in the family. Prewitt signed the documents with a shaking hand. What are you planning to do with that wife of yours? Whatever it takes. That sounds dangerous. Being passive was dangerous. Look where it got me. They drove to the county courthouse and filed the deed transfer. As of 10:30 a.m., Evan no longer owned his workshop. On paper, he was just another employee of Prewitt Stone Works. But Reed's construction loan was now secured by property that didn't belong to Evan. When the bank discovered the collateral had been fraudulently pledged, Reed's entire financial house of cards would collapse. Evan drove back to his workshop, Prewitt's workshop now, and waited. The trap sprung that afternoon. Reed's phone call to the bank triggered an automatic review of the loan collateral. By 3 p.m., Bradley from Keystone Community Bank was calling Evan in a panic. Mr. O'Hara, we have a serious problem. The property you used as collateral for Mr. Caldwell's loan was transferred to another party this morning. That's correct, Evan said calmly. But the loan agreement specifically states that any transfer of collateral property must be approved by the bank in advance. I never agreed to use my property as collateral. Check your records. The power of attorney was forged. Silence on the other end of the line. Evan could hear Bradley typing frantically. Sir, are you alleging fraud? I'm stating a fact. My signature was forged. My property was pledged without my knowledge, and now that property belongs to someone else. Mr. Caldwell's loan is unsecured. We need to investigate this immediately. I have forensic evidence of the forgery. Handwriting analysis, witness statements, the whole package. I suggest you contact your legal department. Bradley's voice was barely a whisper. What do you want us to do? Call the loan. Demand immediate repayment. Protect the bank's interests. Evan hung up and checked his workshop cameras. Reed's truck was parked in the alley again, but this time Reed was pacing back and forth while talking on his phone. The audio feed picked up fragments of his conversation. Can't call the loan now. Need more time. The property's clean, I swear. Reed was trying to negotiate with people who didn't negotiate. His Philadelphia creditors had found out about the collateral problem. Evan smiled and opened another app on his tablet. Time for phase 2. The environmental group was called Green Valley Coalition, and they were always looking for ways to block development projects that threatened local ecosystems. Evan had found their contact information online and arranged a meeting with their president, a fierce woman named Dr. Elizabeth Warren. Your workshop materials contain what substances? She asked, reviewing the documentation Evan had prepared. Limestone dust, granite particles, marble chips. 20 years of accumulated stone byproducts. Evan had been truthful about the workshop's contents, but creative about their environmental impact. All of it concentrated in the building's floor and ventilation system. And this Reed Caldwell wants to demolish the building without proper environmental assessment? The city fast-tracked the permits. No environmental impact study was required. Dr. Warren's eyes lit up with the fervor of someone who'd found a worthy cause. That's a clear violation of state environmental protection statutes. Any demolition involving potential particulate matter requires hazardous material assessment. What would you need to file an injunction? Just a sworn statement from you as the property's former owner. We can have this tied up in court for months. Evans signed the affidavit that afternoon. By evening, Green Valley Coalition had filed emergency injunctions against the city, Reed's construction company, and the demolition contractor. The demolition scheduled for next week was indefinitely postponed pending environmental review. Reed's financial situation deteriorated rapidly. With his loan called by the bank and his construction projects halted by environmental injunctions, he was bleeding money daily. His Philadelphia creditors were no longer accepting excuses. Evan watched it all unfold through surveillance footage and Kyle Brannick's reports. Reed's confident swagger was replaced by desperate phone calls and increasingly erratic behavior. The breaking point came on a Tuesday night. Evan was reviewing footage from the workshop cameras when he saw Reed's truck pull into the alley at 11 p.m. But this time, Reed wasn't alone. 2 men in expensive suits got out of a black sedan that followed Reed's truck. Even through the grainy night vision camera, they looked like exactly what they were. Debt collectors who preferred broken bones to payment plans. The audio feed picked up their conversation clearly. Reed, buddy, we've been patient, the larger man said. His voice carried the casual menace of someone who enjoyed his work. But patience has limits. I just need another week, Reed pleaded. The bank thing is a misunderstanding. I can fix it. The bank thing is you being stupid. Our money wasn't supposed to be tied up in some small-town real estate scam. It's not a scam. The property values are solid. The property you used as collateral doesn't belong to you anymore. Explains why you're such a crap businessman. Evan leaned forward, watching Reed's face crumble as his lies caught up with him. How much do you owe us total? The second man asked. $240. But if you give me time, time's up. You've got 48 hours to come up with our money, or we start collecting in other ways. The men got back in their sedan and drove away, leaving Reed alone in the alley. He slammed his fist against his truck so hard the camera shook. Then he pulled out his phone and called Nadine. We have a problem, Reed said when she answered. A big freaking problem. Evan turned up the volume. What kind of problem? Nadine's voice was tight with worry. The Philadelphia guys found me. They want their money now. How much money? All of it, plus interest. $240 total. Nadine was quiet for a long moment. We don't have that kind of cash. I know. That's why we need to accelerate the timeline. What timeline? The divorce settlement. Your husband's life insurance. Whatever assets we can liquidate quickly. Evan's blood went cold. They weren't just planning to steal his property. They were planning to cash in on his death. Reed, that's crazy. We can't just... We can and we will. These aren't the kind of people who negotiate. If I don't pay them, they'll end me. And probably you too for being associated with me. There has to be another way. There is. We make Evan disappear. Accident at the workshop, gas leak explosion, something dramatic. You get the life insurance payout, we pay off my debts, and we start fresh somewhere else. Nadine's voice was barely a whisper. You're talking about murder. I'm talking about survival. Your choice, baby. Help me or watch me die and take you down with me. The call ended. Reed drove away, leaving Evan alone with the horrifying knowledge that his wife was planning to end him. Evan didn't sleep that night. He sat in his kitchen with the lights off, watching the street through his front window and thinking about 15 years of marriage that had led to this moment. He'd met Nadine at a Veterans Day picnic, drawn to her laugh and the way she asked thoughtful questions about his time overseas. She'd seemed genuinely interested in helping him adjust to civilian life, patient with his nightmares and understanding about his need for quiet, meaningful work. They'd built what Evan thought was a good life together. Not wealthy, but comfortable. Not exciting, but stable. He'd given her everything he had to give, which apparently wasn't enough. At dawn, he called Angela Prewitt. I need to see you immediately, he said. And bring your father. An hour later, they sat in Evan's kitchen while he played the audio recording of Reed and Nadine's conversation. Angela's face went pale. Mr. Prewitt's weathered hands clenched into fists. Jesus Christ, Angela whispered. They're planning to murder you. That's what it sounds like. We have to call the police. And tell them what? That my wife's boyfriend threatened me during a private phone call? They'll say it's hearsay, marital problems, not enough evidence for arrest warrants. Mr. Prewitt leaned forward. So what do you want to do? I want to give them enough rope to hang themselves. Angela shook her head. Evan, if they're serious about ending you, they won't get the chance, but I need them to try. I need them to commit to a plan, take concrete steps, create evidence that even the most skeptical cop can't ignore. That's incredibly dangerous. Everything's dangerous now. The difference is whether I'm a victim or I'm in control. Evan showed them the workshop surveillance footage, the financial documents, the email evidence of the permit fraud. Angela took notes while Mr. Prewitt studied the property deed transfer. You've built a strong case, Angela admitted, but proving fraud is different from preventing murder. What if I could get them to confess on tape? Not just private phone calls, but a face-to-face conversation where they outline their entire plan? How would you do that? Evan smiled grimly. By giving them what they want. A chance to end me in my own workshop. The plan required precise timing and nerves of steel. Evan spent 2 days setting up the trap, installing additional cameras and audio equipment throughout the workshop. He arranged for backup recording devices hidden in places Reed and Nadine would never think to look. Then he called Reed directly. "This is Evan O'Hara," he said when Reed answered. "I think we need to talk." "About what?" "About my wife, my property, and your construction loan. I know everything." Silence on the other end of the line. Evan could almost hear Reed's mind racing. "I don't know what you think you know. I know about the forged power of attorney. I know about the bribes to Sarah Dunn. I know about the hotel rooms and the late-night meetings in my workshop." Evan kept his voice calm, professional. "What I don't know is whether you want to work something out, or if you prefer to let the lawyers handle it." "Work what out?" "Meet me at my workshop tonight, 9 o'clock. Come alone, and we'll discuss terms." "What kind of terms?" "The kind that keep everyone out of prison." Reed was quiet for a long moment. "How do I know this isn't a trap?" "Because if I wanted to trap you, I wouldn't give you advance warning." 9 o'clock, back entrance. Don't bring anyone else." Evan hung up before Reed could respond. Then he called Kyle Brannick. "Tonight's the night," he told the private investigator. "I need you positioned across the street with video equipment. Whatever happens, keep recording." "Evan, are you sure about this?" "No, but I'm sure about the alternative." His final call was to Jerry Fletcher. "I need you to monitor the workshop surveillance feeds tonight," Evan said. "If something goes wrong, call 911 and send them everything." "What exactly are you planning?" "Justice." At 8:45 p.m., Evan parked behind his workshop and walked to the back entrance. The building felt different now, charged with anticipation and danger. Every shadow could hide a threat. He unlocked the door and stepped inside, leaving the lights off. Moonlight filtered through the high windows, casting long shadows across his work tables and half-finished sculptures. At exactly 9 p.m., Reed's truck pulled into the alley. Evan watched through the security monitor as Reed approached the back door. He was alone, as requested, but he moved with the careful steps of someone expecting trouble. "It's open," Evan called when Reed knocked. Reed stepped inside, his eyes adjusting to the dim light. He was bigger than Evan remembered, broader shoulders, longer reach. But size wasn't everything in a fight. "So," Reed said, "what's this about?" "It's about you sleeping my wife and stealing my property." Reed's casual mask slipped for a moment, revealing the predator underneath. "Your wife came to me. Your property was fair game." That's how business works. Business doesn't usually involve forged documents. "Prove it." "I don't have to prove it. The bank already called your loan. Your Philadelphia friends are breathing down your neck. Your construction projects are tied up in environmental court." Evan stepped closer. "You're screwed, Reed. The question is whether you want to go down alone or take Nadine with you." Reed's hand moved toward his jacket pocket. "What do you want?" "I want you to leave town, tonight. Take your debts and your problems and disappear. Leave my wife alone. And if I don't, then I release everything to the police." "The fraud evidence, the surveillance footage, the recorded phone calls where you and Nadine planned to end me for the insurance money." Reed's face went white. "You're bluffing." "Am I?" The workshop door opened behind Reed. Nadine stepped inside, her face hard with determination. "He's not bluffing," she said. "My husband's always been smarter than people think." Reed spun around. "What are you doing here?" "Following you." "I figured you might need backup." Nadine looked at Evan with something that might have been regret. "Hello, honey?" "Nadine, you've been busy. Property transfers, environmental injunctions, financial investigations." "Very thorough." "I learned from watching you." She smiled sadly. "I suppose you did." Reed looked back and forth between them, sensing that something had shifted in the room's dynamics. "What is this?" he demanded. "This is where you find out what happens when you threaten my family," Nadine said quietly. Reed's confusion turned to alarm. "Nadine, what are you talking about?" "I'm talking about your brilliant plan to murder my husband for his life insurance money. Did you really think I'd go along with that? I said a lot of things. I was scared, desperate, caught up in your schemes, but I never agreed to murder." Nadine pulled a small recording device from her purse. "Everything you've said tonight is on tape." Reed's hand moved to his jacket pocket, but Evan was faster. 15 years of stone carving had given him quick, precise movements. He grabbed Reed's wrist and twisted hard, sending a pistol clattering across the concrete floor. "That was stupid," Evan said, maintaining his grip on Reed's arm. Let me go, you piece of crap. I don't think so. Reed swung his free hand at Evan's face, but Evan ducked and drove his shoulder into Reed's midsection. They crashed into a work table, sending tools and stone chips flying. Reed was bigger, but Evan knew the workshop layout by heart. He used that advantage, maneuvering Reed away from the tool and toward the center of the room where the surveillance cameras had the best angles. You want to know why I called you here tonight? Evan grunted as they grappled. It wasn't to make a deal. He broke free from Reed's grip and grabbed a stone chisel from the nearest table. Reed lunged forward, but Evan sidestepped and brought the chisel's handle down on Reed's shoulder. Reed howled and stumbled backward. It was to get you to confess, Evan continued, on camera. With witnesses? What witnesses? As if on cue, the workshop's front door opened. Kyle Brannick entered, followed by 2 uniformed police officers. That would be us, Kyle said. Reed looked around the room wildly, at the cameras mounted in every corner, at Nadine holding her recording device, at the police officers moving to block his escape routes. This is a setup, he snarled. Yes, it is, Evan agreed. A very thorough one. Officer Baez stepped forward, handcuffs ready. Reed Caldwell, you're under arrest for fraud, conspiracy, extortion, and conspiracy to commit murder. You can't prove any of that. Actually, we can. Baez gestured toward the surveillance cameras. We've been watching this whole thing. You just confessed to forging documents, bribing city officials, and planning to murder Mr. O'Hara. Plus, we found the tool you were carrying. Reed's face crumpled as the reality of his situation hit him. Nadine, tell them. Tell them this is all a misunderstanding. Nadine looked at him with disgust. The only misunderstanding was thinking you were worth destroying my marriage. But we had plans. You had plans, I had doubts. And when you started talking about murder, I realized how far off the rails this had gone. Reed was handcuffed and led away, still protesting his innocence. The workshop fell quiet except for the sound of distant sirens. Evan looked at his wife, really looked at her, for the first time in months. When did you figure it out? He asked. That you knew about us? About 3 weeks ago? You started acting differently, more careful. Nadine set down the recording device. When did you start planning this? The day I saw you with those city permits. And the property transfer to Mr. Prewitt. Angela Prewitt's idea. Smart girl. Nadine nodded slowly. So, what happens now? Now you get arrested too. Her face went pale. Evan, you forged my signature, committed fraud, helped steal my property, and had an affair with a man who wanted to end me. Did you think there wouldn't be consequences? Officer Baez approached with a second set of handcuffs. Mrs. O'Hara, you're under arrest for fraud, conspiracy, and accessory to attempted extortion. As Nadine was led away, she looked back at Evan one last time. I'm sorry, she said. I know, Evan replied. But sorry doesn't fix anything. The media attention was intense but brief. Local newspapers ran stories about municipal corruption and construction fraud. The city council launched an investigation into the permit approval process. Sarah Dunn was arrested and lost her job. Reed Caldwell was sentenced to 8 years in federal prison for financial fraud and conspiracy. His Philadelphia creditors seized his remaining assets, leaving him bankrupt and powerless. Nadine plea bargained down to 3 years in minimum security prison and permanent disbarment from city employment. She would serve 18 months with good behavior. Evan signed the divorce papers on a Tuesday morning in October. Liam chose to stay with his father, having heard enough evidence during the trial to understand what had really happened. Are you okay? Liam asked that evening as they worked together in the workshop, now officially transferred back to Evan's name. I'm getting there, Evan said, putting the finishing touches on a memorial tablet. Are you? Yeah, it's weird, but I'm kind of proud of you for fighting back. I'm proud of you too, for handling all this like an adult. They worked in comfortable silence for a while, father and son surrounded by the smell of stone dust and the sound of careful, precise craftsmanship. Dad? Liam said eventually. Yeah? What are you going to do now? I mean, with your life? Evan considered the question. The workshop was his again, free and clear. His reputation had survived the scandal. If anything, he'd gained respect from people who admired his methodical response to betrayal. I'm going to keep making things, he said finally. Beautiful things that last longer than the people who made them. That sounds good. What about you? Any thoughts about your future? Liam smiled and picked up a piece of granite. Maybe I'll learn to carve stone. Seems like a useful skill. It is. Teaches you patience. How to work slowly, carefully, removing only what needs to be removed. Like life? Exactly like life. 6 months later, Evan received a letter from Nadine in prison. She wrote about the counseling sessions, the job training programs, the slow process of understanding how her choices had led to disaster. She didn't ask for forgiveness. She didn't beg him to visit or take her back when she was released. She simply wanted him to know that she understood what she'd lost and why she'd deserved to lose it. Evan read the letter once, then filed it away with the rest of the legal documents from their divorce. Some things were worth preserving as reminders, even if they were painful. He'd started dating Angela Prewitt, slowly, carefully, like everything else he did these days. She understood the value of taking time, of building something solid before declaring it finished. Mr. Prewitt had moved into a small apartment behind the workshop, officially becoming Evan's business partner. The old man's experience and Evan's skill made for a profitable combination. On a warm spring evening, Evan stood in his workshop doorway, watching the sunset paint the sky orange and pink. The building was exactly as it had been a year ago. Same tools, same work tables, same smell of stone dust and possibility. But everything was different now. He was different. The betrayal had nearly destroyed him, but it had also taught him something valuable, that he was stronger than he'd known, smarter than his enemies had assumed, and more resilient than anyone had given him credit for. Reed Caldwell had underestimated the quiet man who carved stones for a living. Nadine had thought her husband was too passive to fight back effectively. They'd both learned that still waters run deep, and that sometimes the most dangerous person in the room is the one who says the least. Evan locked the workshop door and walked toward his truck. Tomorrow he would start work on a new commission, a memorial garden for the city park, featuring angels and doves and inscriptions about hope conquering despair. It seemed appropriate. Behind him, the workshop sat solid and permanent in the gathering dusk, like truth itself, patient, enduring, and impossible to destroy.